So we're about to bring in our first guest, which is Rebecca Mitchell. So she's this awesome public health researcher who's running for to represent, is it Gwinnett County in Georgia State Legislature? So we're gonna welcome Rebecca. It's really an honor to have you with us.
Okay, get her in from backstage.
Yeah, just to make that long trip.
Hey, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
So we really appreciate, folks like you standing up and running for State House, because as we were talking about earlier, it's so important to flip not just the national level legislative houses, but also the state houses, because so much that affects people's daily lives happens there. So I wanted to maybe start off by asking you to share, what your background's like and why you decided to run for Georgia Statehouse.
Sure. So my background is not political at all. I've never intended to run for office. My education is, I have a veterinary degree, so I'm a veterinarian, and I have a PhD in epidemiology, and specifically my PhD was on transmission dynamics of infectious disease. Never did I ever imagine that particular PhD title would be appropriate for a candidate running for public office. And I actually, when I initially ran, focused more on the fact that I come from public health and I come from public health research. So I really bring a critical scientific eye to developing policies that are going to have an impact on health. At this very moment, we do desperately need people who understand transmission dynamics of infectious disease in our legislature. So it is an extra skill set that I think we'll really be able to use. Personally, why I ran, because I have 4 small children. As of yesterday, they are 6, 5, 3, and 3. And when I was pregnant with my oldest child at 21 weeks and 6 days, we got a diagnosis that he would be born with a major birth defect. So at that point, my husband was foreign. I didn't live in the U.S. We were planning not to live in the U.S. long term, but it was 2013, and we realized if we ever got off American health care, there would be no guarantee that we would be able to get back into it. And that wasn't a risk we were willing to take. So we moved to Georgia, and my son was born. He had his first surgery. Everything looked great. And I went to his pediatrician at 6 months, and they informed me that he'd been dropped from my plan. I was a 1099 employee, which meant I was on ACA. And in Georgia, if you don't make enough income, your children will get moved to a different program. However, instead of getting enrolled in the state program, I just got disenrolled from ACA. Given we'd moved an entire continent, for me, that was really a life-changing moment. I was extremely lucky. My husband had moved to the States and started a job. He started a job 2 weeks before, so we could change to the family plan. But what happened to me that day happens to 1.4 million Georgians every day, right? There 1.4 million of us do not have health insurance and do not have the ability to use the healthcare system. So for me, running is really, I live in the most flippable district in all of Georgia. The only reason this district has not flipped before is because we did not have a candidate on the ballot. So it's really important that when our state is making important decisions about whether or not they're going to try to dismantle ACA protections here in the state, whether or not they're willing to expand healthcare so that more people with expansion of Medicaid immediately, almost 500,000 Georgians will have access to healthcare in a way they do not right now. And for me, of course, in Georgia, we passed a 6-week abortion bill. As a parent who has stood at a decision-making moment after 20 weeks, I know exactly what the implications of that are. And I know that I would never add more voices into that discussion that aren't the parents, the family, and the doctor. And that's all that belongs in that space. And I stood outside the State House while they passed that bill, and I realized we couldn't change it. We were shouting for someone to change their vote who absolutely would not change their vote. And we didn't need to ask him to change his vote. We can just have that vote. And for me, that was the decision-making moment where I realized we're going to do this, and we're going to put this seat, and we're going to work together as a team, because we need 16 seats to control redistricting. We need 16 seats to stop bills like that. We need 16 seats to get Medicaid expansion here, all things that will have dramatic impacts on the lives of Georgians. So that's kind of my why. Sorry, I don't know how long I was supposed to do that.
No, that was beautiful. And my question was going to be kind of like, what do you hope to accomplish at the State House? And I really appreciate this kind of way that you've talked both about representation and, the health needs of so many of people in your state, right? Yeah. Karen, what were you going to ask?
Well, I just wanted to say that, the right to make those choices is so heavy on so many of our minds right now in this
Yeah.
moment, with Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. And so, but we can't forget that at the state level, this battle has been going on really in a way that's been incredibly limiting to a lot of people. And I really appreciate you taking that stand for outside the state house and now pushing to get inside the state house. I wanted to ask, your platform mentions the Georgia Justice Act. Could you share more about what that is and why it's important?
Yes, so it's actually the Justice for All Act was a series of bills that came forward last session that got proposed by the Democrats, which are all intended to make policing more fair and regulated and our justice system more regulated, right? So we want to do things that are making sure we are more equitable in how we are policing, and we want to make sure that we're doing things like eliminating citizens arrest, eliminating no-knock warrants, making sure that qualified immunity isn't a license to have no repercussions, right? So it's a series of steps that are some are more intuitive at the face of them, and some of them looking at like moving jurisdictions for trials that include DAs, right? It has a fundamental difference in checks and balances in that system. So there's a series of 12 bills. You can go look at all the different bills that were proposed, and they're all things that we should see reintroduced this session and hopefully get some, if not all of them, through.
Yeah, that's cool. I guess one of the things that we've been asking a lot of people from the different states is just kind of about voter registration and some of the important dates and deadlines that they might have for their state. And I guess we were just curious what your thoughts are for like the most safest and convenient ways for people to be able to vote in Georgia this election.
Yes, that's a great question. So in Georgia, absolutely the safest way to vote is vote by mail. Right, you can have no contact with anyone. We have we have multiple ways to request a vote by mail ballot. One of them is a ballotrequest.sos.ga.gov, which has the English language option. And then secondarily in Gwinnett, we also offer a Spanish language ballot request option. And if you Google voter registration in Spanish in Gwinnett, that link will pop up. And that one you have to print out and submit. But the English language version you can just do automatically online, and a lot of those ballots have actually been processed. So in my district, about 4,000 ballots have already been processed, and they will be mailed to people, and then you can bring them. You can either put them back in the mail, or you can drop them at a drop box. And in Gwinnett, there are 6 current drop boxes and 15 more being added at our public libraries. So awesome. Once you fill out the ballot, you can just go drop it in. That's definitely the safest way. A second option that works well and gives you a little bit more space and less concerned about lines is, of course, voting early. And in my county, from October 12th to October 30th, you can vote from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at selected sites within the district. So there is really a lot of opportunity to vote either by mail or vote early to avoid the lines on election day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rick.
Wherever you go. I said, and wear your mask, whether you're voting before or you're going to just wear your mask. Always wear your mask. So we're helping.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else that we didn't discuss that you'd like us, you'd want to highlight? Maybe some other candidates on the ballot with you, or other things that you think people should know?
Yeah. So again, we need 16 seats, and if you go look at the list, there are at least 20 targeted candidates, but there are a whole bunch of great Democratic candidates here in Georgia. If I highlight one, I want to highlight them all. So I will say, just go Google targeted seats in Georgia and see all of them. There's amazing people. There's voter registration expert. There's people who come from nursing. There's people who come from arts. So there's a whole variety of skill sets. And I think your state legislature isn't only about representing the district you come from, which is the first and most important criteria, but it's also about building a skill set as a team that allows you to build strong legislation, and really looking at all these 16 people coming in or 20 people who we get in. We will be strengthening the caucus's ability to write really strong legislation across a variety of areas. I'd also highlight the Georgia Senate needs 6 seats to flip, and I think the top flippable seats there are Sarah Beeson, Nikki Merritt, and Madeline Jones. 2 of whom are in Gwinnett. And there are also a bunch of wonderful candidates there, but it's not 20 names. So I'd be there a while.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, we'll definitely, for those that are listening right now, we'll go ahead and do some research and get some of those links in the chat, just so that way people can actually go and start to do that research for themselves, because definitely we appreciate that call that the more that we can try to build this coalition of like from this really wide spectrum of worldview, right? I think that's really important, especially as we think about how to recreate our communities. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate you coming on here. And also I really love the idea of like a crew of 16 candidates that can really like come in and build a coalition, make a difference. So really appreciate you joining us, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And if anyone wants to contribute to Rebecca's campaign, go to www.rebeccaforgeorgia.com.
And I will follow that up and just say we need phone bankers. So if anybody wants to make phone calls, we need so many phone bankers. So if you are in a position where you can donate time rather than finances, we welcome either contribution.
Is there a link that you could recommend people look for that, or they just go to your website? Or
yep. So the website is rebeccaforgeorgia.com and then /get-involved.
There you go. Cool.
Thank you
so much.
Ciao.